Hello, all. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon. It's the Christmas night. It's Merry Christmas to everyone. Uh, I've been out for a while with some issues on my laptops and all. So sorry for the gap, but today we'll start talking about how do you install Business Center 2022 Release Wave 2. That has been already released for a while. I got some questions around it, so I thought let's talk about it. As you know, there are two cumulative updates are already out, so we'll start with installing cumulative update 2. So let's talk about first how you get it. So normally on my blog every month, whenever there's a cumulative update, I do post out a blog article about from where you can download it, what uh, what is the platform version, what is the application version, and all. So you can always check that. So as you can see, the latest one is this from December 14th, and when cumulative update 2 for Business Center 21 was released. Here you also get detail of updates and download link. So you can either click directly on the download link and it'll take you to the page where you can download it from. Once you're here, you can hit the download, choose the localized version of the product that you need. Let's say in my case, it'll be US, and then you hit next and it starts download. The downloaded file comes into a zip or a RAR format, so you can unzip it and keep it safe with you. Then, as I always explain this process in the installation videos, you need to make sure that the path of the installer is as small as it can be. Like if you look at it right now, I have placed it in my D drive inside a folder demo, and then I have BC21.2. The reason behind that, as I have explained in the previous videos, is that during the installation process, these files need to copy from this folder to the actual C directories or whatever your operating system directories are. And there's a limit of windows where if the file path becomes uh, bigger than a specific size, then it's errors out. So it's always better practice to keep it as small as you can. But before we install Business Central 21.2, I just would like to show you something. So, or let's see that later. So before installing BC or any version or any software in general, you should always make sure that you know what are the system requirements for that product. So these are the requirements which are available on MSDN, and I'll pin the link in the first comment or in the description of the video. And there are some specific requirements. The common question that's floating around in the community that, oh, I have this operating system, I cannot install Business Central, and what are the reasons? And that all will kind of get sorted out if you read this documentation. As we all know, either in Dynamics Nav or Business Central, there are different components that get installed when you install these products on-prem. There's a web client. The minimum requirement for this is one of the supported browser, which everybody have, so that's not a problem. We are not going with mobile app, but otherwise these are the requirements, and these are minimum requirements as it states here. So this is not the suggested requirement from Microsoft. These are the minimum that's required to run Business Center. We don't have a desktop app, as in you can install an app from the browser, but that's okay. For AL development, if you're doing, these are the operating system requirements, and then you need Visual Studio Code and spaces and all. But the important part is server component, because that's the component which allows a user who accesses Business Central from the web browser to connect to the database, and that all interaction happens through the Business Central server or service tier component. And this is where you need to understand that the supported operating system to install a Business Central server is either Windows 11 Pro, Enterprise, or Education with 64-bit. Same for Windows 10 or otherwise the server edition. Now, why it is important? Because most of the people are trying to install it on a home edition of Windows, and that's where they see this error message. So make sure that you read the requirement and you have the right supported operating system that's needed for installation of any software in general, not just Business Center. Then, if you are installing locally, then the the website will also be hosted on your local machine. And again, there are certain requirements to have the ISS installed, which also comes with the specific versions and specific builds of Windows. So make sure that you have either Windows 10 or 11 Pro, Enterprise, or Education with 64-bit edition operating system. Hope that's clear. Then we need SQL Server to have the database, and if it is not there, the SQL Server gets installed from the product also. It's part of the Express version. It's part of the product DVD if it is not there. Otherwise, if you have one, that's better in that case. Okay, lot of theory. Let's start talking about it. So remember one thing, that if you have a situation like I have right now, that I already have Business Central 20.1 installed, or any other versions of Business Central that is already installed, and you're trying to install 21.2 or the latest build, you need to make sure you need to do some prerequisite before you install the newest version. So here is what you need to do. Go to your Start menu, search for the Business Central Administration Cell or Development Cell and Administration. These are the three components that get installed. Right click and open that folder. Once you come here, you'll see that I have already renamed some of the icons with the version. So these are for my Business Central 14, which I have to use for certain projects and work, which is the last version where the CL environment was there. So if you don't rename these and install the new versions, these files will get overwritten and will always point to the latest version. You can still get access to the older versions, but you'll have to spend some time and energy into it. So before doing anything, let's start renaming these shortcuts so that they don't go away when I install the newest version. Okay, let me see. 20, and then this is also my 20. So just to make sure that these doesn't get overridden when I install the 21, and you'll notice it once we are done with our installation. Okay, so that's done. There are three icons: the development shell, the administration, and the administration cell. And we'll come to that if needed. I've added the 20 there so that they don't get overridden. Now let's extract the DVD. I hope everybody would have done it till now. And then let's follow the simple process, which is let's go to the setup. Under administrator, yes, pops up the Business Central installation screen, accept the license, choose advanced installation option, and then I prefer to choose the components that get installed on my machine rather than installing demo. So let's choose the installation option. If you want to go with the default, you can choose demo, and that's also okay. It takes the default settings that are defined. I would like to customize what I would like to install. So I can click on customize. And now here is where I'll take a pause. And let's go back to 20.1. Run the setup here. Yes. And let's do this. You'll notice a small difference in the screen where there's AL development environment both the places. The web servers component is both the places. SQL Server component in both the versions. Server is on the both version. But there's one component which is available in Business Central 20, but what is not available in 21, which is the server administrative tool. Now, it's not a surprise. It was well defined by Microsoft. They announced it, I guess, a year ago, and most probably more than that. where they said that they'll be discontinuing the server administration tool. Now, what is server administration tool is what you see when you search here for Business Central administration. So this GUI, which allows you to change the parameters on your service tier, this window was not part of Business Central 21 and going forward. So that's the change. If you have already installed and you are searching for this component and you are not finding it, the reason is because that component is no longer available with Business Central 21. There are alternatives to it, like you can do it from PowerShell. You can manually change parameters on file. And just FYI, if any of you think that we should talk about it in a separate video, let me know. We can all build one PowerShell query which helps you to kind of change any of these parameters if needed. But only this component will not be available in Business Central 21, and that's one major difference for on-premise customers. So I'll cancel this. Let's get back to our installation process. So I would like all these components. That's all is needed. The AL development environment installs, let's read it. It installs the AL language extension, which gives you a VSI file, which you don't use typically, but does that. The server installs the file based on which we see that administration window popped up. It's eventually behind the scenes file, which, with the help of the server administration tool, gives you a GUI way to change those parameters. The SQL Server database component will install the demo database for you, and if any other components are needed. And then the web server component will install the or will host a website on your ISS so that you can then manage that website for Business Central from there. Like the last component, web server component, will add one more component here, which will be BC201 or 210. Let's see what happens. So all looks good. Let's click next, and here's the configuration window. What is your server name? My local host. What is the service name that you want to give? That's BC210. The service account that will be used to connect between the user and the environment, which will be defined on your service tier, will be used as network service. Whatever account is defined here in the past, where the administration tool was part of it, you can also see that here as the account that is used for running services. So that's the account that's here. If you don't use network service, then you also have to specify the password for that account, and then comes the port selection. Now, a service now need 5 ports, uh, and it was similar in the previous version. Just remember that you should not be using the ports that you have already defined. In my case, for my Business Central 14, I am using ports in range of 10, and in my Business Central 20 service, I'm using the ports in 70 range, 60 range, 6049, 6045, and all. So I'm safe enough if I use this. But if you are already using this number on a different service, either from the same version or from a different version, you should always change it to the version to the ports which are not yet assigned on any of the service. In my case, it's already done, so I don't need to worry about it. But then I add the management services rule to firewall. Coming down here, I don't want SOAP or OData enable at this point, and I don't like the snapshot debugger right now. That's a different thing. I would like to add the client service rule to firewall. My credential types are Windows at this moment, and then I would like to have my SQL Server database named as this, and will not replace the existing database if it is already there with this same, and will upload the license, which is the Cronus license in this case. And then this part will set up the ISS website on your ISS server, IIS server, sorry. Now we might see an error as soon as I hit apply, and we'll talk about it if we see it. And that's the reason I have both the versions installed. Let's hit apply and let's see what happens. So right now, it's first thing it's doing is installing the dependencies. What are the prerequisite? If they're already there, that's great. It'll complete earlier. If they are not there, then those components will get installed on the server that you are installing. Now, this is just for development purposes where you're installing all these components on one single machine. But in a real world situation, all the service tier should be installed on a separate machine, and your ISS or IIS, I always mispronounce it, should be installed on a separate machine so that it doesn't increase the load on that one particular server. So let's wait and hope that nothing breaks up and it does the installation as it is expected. But if there is an error, we'll talk about it. Okay, so it's installing right now. Okay, the SQL Server component is restoring the database on my SQL Server with the name that I have selected in the settings during the installation. And then at the end, it'll just install the website on my local IIS. I think I'm correct this time. Yes. Okay, so the installations are becoming simpler and simpler. People who have done Dynamics Nav installation know how complex those were. If you do check your prerequisite correctly, if you are uh, safe with your system requirements, the hardware requirements, and the software requirements that are needed to install Business Central, then the installations are pretty much easier. You don't have to spend good amount of time in doing installation, but they are pretty simple enough at this moment. So it seems all these components are installed correctly. And the last component, which is the web server component, where the website will be created on our ISS server, is executing. Once that's done, we should be able to test out how it looks and uh, see is there an error, because sometimes the errors don't pop up during the installation. At the end, then we might get an error message. And that happens, we'll understand why there's an error message and so on and so forth. If there are any other questions related to installation, please do add them into the comments. I am a little bit behind on replying to those comments, but I'll make sure that I reply to each and every comments that you guys post there. If there is any other feature that you like, but you'd like to get more details about it, you can just also add that into the comments and I'll make sure that we talk about it. Okay, so there was no error, luckily. If there's an error sometime and you face it, let me know. I'll try to recreate that scenario for you and we'll show you how to fix it. So this is completed. Let's hit close. Let's minimize this. Let's refresh this. We should see the service, but because this is based on Business Central 20, we should not be able to access this because it doesn't, it only manages uh, the version 20. It cannot manage the 21.0, but it's installed. I can see the status of it. It is still start pending. Maybe it's starting, but let's go to the IIS server and see what happened there. So let me refresh the screen and I see BC21. Let's try to see that can we access it. So I'll click browse here and that should pop up my browser. And if everything, if the service is already started, then it will allow me to access that. Otherwise, I'll have to do some steps to make sure that my service is ready. Okay. So it seems service is not running. Uh, there are different ways to start a service. Um, let's try the PowerShell way, because if somebody is interested, we'll talk about that going forward. So let me try to run my PowerShell IC. That's the easiest GUI approach. I like things graphically and intelligence. So the first thing when you are on PowerShell IC is you have to import the module that you need for this version. Okay, Okay, and then Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central 210 service, and then .ps1 is the model, which will have all the commands that are generated, but it seems I cannot do it. Oh, because script is disabled. So let me just set the execution policy. This is new laptop, execution policy, remote policy. Okay, sign, ports. Okay, and let me install this. Okay, so as when you run this, if it shows you a list of commands, as I can see here, you're good there. Now there is one of the command, and we can talk about it some other day, which is restart nav server instance BC210 is my service name. So this should actually restart my service tier, and I should be able to see it here when the restart is happening. Still trying to restart it. Once the restart happens, I'll be able to see a prompt here, which I'm waiting right now. But hopefully that happens quickly than expected. Okay. There's another way to restart the service, which is you can search for legacy services.msc on your start menu. Once you get in there, every service that you see here also gets created here, which is this one. It says starting. I'm not going to touch it. Let's wait for it. Okay. Okay. So it started running. You see the confirmation here. Now let's try to go back home. This will allow me to access client and will connect to my SQL database. So what has changed from Business Center 20 to 21 for on-premise customers only, because this was not available for SaaS or Business Central Online ever, is that you don't get access to the administration panel where you can manage your services. As I said earlier, if it seems that we need to talk about it, let me know. I'll spend some time and start talking about it. But my environment is ready, and I can just verify that this has been sent 21.2, which is correct. And then the thing that we did in the beginning before we started migration, let's check that. So let's go into open file location. And if you look at it now, the names would have been same if I would not have appended the 20 here or 14 here. Not in this case, but in this case, not administration. Administration cell, and administration shell. All are named same, so the system by default would have overwritten whatever the configuration files were there for the previous version. So three important things that you need to remember when you're installing. One, do check what are the hardware and the software requirement for installing that software. Are you meeting those requirements? Second, make sure that you keep the product DVD as closest to the root drive so that the files can be copied easily and there are no errors related to copying file. Third, before installing, if you have another version of Navision or Business Central installed, make sure the shortcuts that are pointing to that version are renamed so that they don't get overlapped with the recent installation. If you have any other question related to installation, or if you would like me to talk about how you manage your services, different things that you do, please let me know in comments. We'll surely talk about it in the future videos if that makes sense. When you're doing that, please specify what are the common things that you do in your services so that we can specifically talk about the problems that you might face while managing services for yourself or your customers. That's all for today, and have a Merry Christmas and New Year. We'll see you in the next video, hopefully this year, if possible, otherwise, in the beginning of the next year for sure. Have a great day. See you then.